Hello.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great. Welcome to the Medical Marijuana Testing Advisory Committee. We're just waiting for others to join to see if we can make a quorum. We think we've got around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people at the minute, so we're waiting on 3 more. which we need 9 to make a quorum and get started. So if you can just bear with us for a few more minutes, we'll see if we can get others to join here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. We are just waiting for one more member so that we can make a quorum. We're at 8 people. We need 9. So if you could bear with us a few more minutes. And as always, if there's others that you know that are on the committee that aren't in attendance so far, feel free to email them or text them if you can. That would be great. Okay, thanks for waiting, everyone. Welcome to the Medical Marijuana Testing Advisory Council. It's, I think, about 4 minutes after 1. Thank you for bearing with us till we seen a quorum there, at least online. I believe we've got 9 members, so we can proceed, but I'm going to go ahead and take the roll call first. If you could unmute yourself when I call your name and let me know that you're here. I will start with Maxwell Lung.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maxwell. Murray Stein is in the room. Murray?
Present.
Thank you. Tim Nolan?
Present.
Thank you. Connor Griffith?
Here.
Thank you. Steve Cottrell?
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Matt Lascala?
Here.
Thank you. Joe DeMena?
Here.
Jay Neary? I don't see Jay online.
No, I think he needs the link, so I think we're gonna send it to him.
Okay, we're gonna send Jay the link. Okay, so I'll mark him as tentative here until we get him online. Elizabeth Brady, I believe, has told us she couldn't make it, so we'll mark her absent. Zhonghua Xiong, I believe, told us he couldn't make it, so we'll mark him absent. Victor Hugo Ramos Sanchez,
Here.
thank you. Ty Garber. I'll call again for Ty Garber. We don't hear Ty, so we'll mark him absent. And then I believe Nathaniel Allen responded that he wouldn't be able to make it either, so we'll mark him absent. So I believe we have a quorum here of 9 and we can get started. So again, thanks for joining today. We have, this is our September call, right at the very end of September here. And so I'll just start out with our review of our council's charge and run through that quickly. ARS 36-2821C, the Advisory Council shall annually review the marijuana testing programs under this chapter and chapter 28.2 of this title, and on or before the second Monday in January of each year shall submit to the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Health and Human Services Committee chairpersons of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and the Department of Health Services, a report that does not disclose any identifying information and that includes the following. Firstly, an assessment as to whether an analyte should be removed from the required statutory testing panel. Secondly, the number of statements of deficiencies relating to testing that was issued to each nonprofit medical marijuana dispensary, third-party independent lab, marijuana establishment, and marijuana testing facility in the preceding year. The remediation efforts made to address each deficiency and the resolution of each statement of deficiency. The information may not disclose any identifying information, but shall delineate the information by entity. And finally, any other recommendations on improving the testing programs. And so with that, I'd just like to welcome our new member, Connor Griffith, representing the designee of the statewide nonprofit Cannabis Testing Association. So thank you for joining. He is our newest member to join. We still have a few vacancies left, so if you know anyone that might fit some of those vacancies, please feel free to let us know. I believe we are in the process of hopefully finding a lab scientist position that will meet the requirements, and we're assessing that at the minute. So again, thank you for your help with that. And with that, I'm going to move forward and turn it over to our first speaker on the council. And that will be Murray Stein. And Murray, I believe you're going to talk about general information on terpenes in cannabis.
That is correct. Thank you. So let me just say that the discussion from the prior meeting touched on terpenes, which certainly got our attention. We, as a manufacturer of infused products, are very interested in terpenes and their health aspects. So we've been studying them for some time. We know when they occur, when they don't, so on. So terpenes have always sort of been treated, at least here, sort of secondary. We know they're important to people's experience with cannabis, and there's been some changes in the last few years in terms of what other states do and how they see terpenes. So what I wanted to do was, even though we've got some university researchers that are on this call, and they're going to know far more than I will, we've developed our own content over the years that were meant to sort of lift the bar in terms of educating a layperson audience in terms of terpenes. So I felt like it would be best to just do a few minutes of explaining what terpenes are and then why they're relevant from our perspective. So if you'll go to the next slide, the simple answer is that they're found in almost all plants and in fact in some insects. They're extremely common compounds. In plants in particular, they're secreted specifically by plant glands, and they basically are produced within the trichomes of cannabis plants. These are little hairy crystal little things that you see. That's usually considered at least a partial guide to potency in terms of cannabis. They're secreted by the plant because they're either meant to either attract or repel pests for pollination purposes, attraction, and to repel others. And they've had literally many tens of thousands of years to evolve to where they are today. So a common example is limonene. Limonene is a very common terpene, appears in many different plants, and is actually representative of where a terpene can be in terms of the scale of practicality and usefulness. In very small amounts, terpene, limonene can be used in aromatherapy. It can be added to various products, presuming it remains stable and there are known health benefits. By the same token, limonene in concentration is an industrial cleaner. I really want to make that point that, terpenes are largely driven, they're volatile compounds, they're largely driven by how much we're talking about. And that gets to another point in a moment. So their primary constituents, you'll find them in cannabis. They're responsible for aromatic and flavor profiles for many different plants. They interact with our human endocannabinoid system the same way phytocannabinoids do. They stimulate the same receptors, and they're seen as working in synergy with the key cannabinoids, THC and CBD. Many perceive the presence of terpenes and their relative profiles in inhalables as representative of that experience. In other words, whether you feel a little bit more excited or a little bit more sedative, terpenes can have an effect. And there's a lot of information out there. Some of it may be more valid than others, but there's a lot of information out there that sort of guides a user on what the terpene profile is of common strains and how that terpene profile might be appropriate for their particular consideration. So, there are many, many different terpenes in nature. There's a few hundred that exist in cannabis, and, only maybe 2-3 dozen of those are seen in any kind of reasonable number. So most of the labs, if not all the labs, currently have a terpene test panel. I'll show you in a moment what one of those looks like. And they basically test for terpenes, if they're requested to. So this is just next slide, please. And I've actually moved past this one already, making those points I did. So if you go to the third one is just next one, I'm sorry. This is just an illustration of showing you what terpenes do in terms of interacting with some of the same receptors or neurotransmitters in the human body. The GABA receptor, the CB1, CB2, the ADA, these are all part of the human physiology, and they have been shown to affect these things on the right, these various therapeutic activities, if you will. So, for example, we mentioned limonene. It can be anti-inflammatory. It can be gastroprotective. It's been shown to have some benefits with MS, and it's well known to be an analgesic. So we know there's this medical tie to these things, and that's, we're the Medical Marijuana Technical Advisory Council. So why terpenes? Why now? What is the reason for all of this in terms of what we want to do? Next slide, please. Again, this is sort of a bit better drill down of some of the key benefits of these. We're familiar with limonene because it's citrus. If you, cut a lemon and you smell the rind, that's what you're talking about. We're seen as a more musky smell. Anyone that's dealt with flower cannabis is going to recognize these particular terpenes. Next slide, please. Now, states with terpene testing. Well, this is, like I said, there's been a lot of changes. If you just go back 3 or 4 years, most everybody didn't bother with terpenes. It was still early. But now these states have programs that actually require terpene testing for their products. I can't tell you specifics about this. I think that's a subject of additional investigation that I'm going to consider inviting the committee to pursue, because should we elect to pursue testing, we're going to need to know what that panel should look like.
Nevada is also another state that's included on that list that you just happen to oversee.
Thank you very much. So as Steve said, Nevada is also in here. There are some states that don't require it, but they encourage it. But these states currently do require it. Next slide, please. So if you're going to do a terpene panel, you're looking at $50 to $60. Just depends on the lab you work with. It's the usual story. If you're doing much in terms of volume or whatnot, then they can come down a little bit in price. But that's important because the cost of terpene testing is going to be a consideration for manufacturers, but it's not a huge load given the other costs are paying. Next slide. This last slide is a terpene test panel. I just clipped this off of one of our key labs. You'll notice the little arrows to the right. Those indicate a terpene presence in this particular product. This happens to be a final product. It's actually a tincture. I point this out because tinctures are one of the kinds of products that you will see terpene expression. And when I say that, I mean natural terpene expression. The natural terpenes from the original flower that are extracted into the cannabis oil, assuming the extraction technique supports it. Not all do. But assuming you've captured those terpenes, these are the ones that have to appear in this particular product for this particular batch that was associated with it. We typically see anywhere from 4 to 7 terpenes, maybe 8 if we're lucky, present in cannabis. And there tends to be a rolling sort of list of the ones you get. It's maybe, I'd say twice or 3 times as many as you see represented here that you can be hit with. And of course, terpenes are like cannabinoids. Sometimes they're in the noise. So when the labs do tests, they'll do a first pass test that establishes the potency within a pretty good order, first term order. But if you're looking for something that's way lower in frequency, you're going to have a big curve representing THC, maybe a smaller curve representing CBD, but you might have some tiny little things out here to the right that represent, and the curve represent these other cannabinoids, which because they're more or less the noise level, you don't be seeing. They're not obvious. So generally we ask a lab to boost those. They'll do what's called a dilution, and then they'll be able to boost the signal on those so that we can see their presence. And often we find things like that when we just look a little harder. Now,
Murray, you're not finding specific concentrations of these, or it's just
you do.
presence? Oh, you do get
Yeah,
the
okay,
concentration?
then they're in some
Okay.
kind of concentration. And usually they're predominant, but even some of the lesser terpenes, they may appear if the lab does sufficient investigation. Next slide. So this is the last slide, and this is really the sum. We have lots of scientific studies that show that there's a connection between what terpenes and cannabinoids are doing. There are clear indications of health benefits to them. Interestingly, moderate extraction and manufacturing practices can isolate terpenes economically, and not even necessarily taking the terpenes from cannabis. It's pretty common now that you can buy products off the shelf. There'll be a concentrate of particular terpenes that are the same as present in cannabis, but they're extracted from other plants where they might occur in greater amounts. So the fact that they can be manufactured and sold means that they get used in cannabis products as an additive, that they weren't necessarily the natural terpenes that were present. And sometimes that's because of the nature of the process. Sometimes it's because the manufacturer is looking for a specific profile. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road for me. And that is to say, if you're going to add terpenes to a product, and if you know there can be a toxicity associated with it, and there's a toxicity associated with everything. You think water's healthy. Drink enough of it, it'll kill you. So the issue is understanding what the toxicity is of the core terpenes to make sure that if we do set limits, and we do so with testing, that we're very clear about what is representative and reasonable. When we smoke something, we're creating heat, we're carbonizing what we're smoking. It produces a whole bunch of other chemicals. One can always say, yeah, this probably isn't the healthiest thing for my body. So others use vape pens, and sometimes those introduce terpenes that are industrial in nature. And of course, they can be added to edibles, though they're not added to edibles in a large amount yet. But they are starting to get attention again because of the experience that cannabis and its products can provide. So, this is basically what I want to share. There are 3 papers that I've shared copies here. And if you're on the committee, then you would have gotten an email from Fabiola, and I apologize. A couple of those papers were truncated, but they're meant to be not scientific papers, but really position papers that discuss what terpenes are, how they're used, what we understand about the current scientific evidence in terms of their benefits for medical. I had intended to make a motion originally when, say a few weeks ago, but I really believe that between now and the next session with the MMTAC, we should take some time and truly try to understand terpenes. And if we did choose to test, what would we be testing for? And then pursuant to that, perhaps at a meeting before the end of the year, that I would be inclined to make a motion to suggest to the state that we start to incorporate terpene testing into our model. And that's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Anyone, any questions or comments from Murray? Hopefully you all got to look at those papers. If you haven't, we can certainly send them out again.
There needs to be an applaud button. Great job, Murray. Great
Thank you,
job.
Steve. Thank you.
We can do that from here.
And we'll make sure those are all posted online too. They probably already are. I figured. Fabulous on top of things. But I'll be updated.
So yeah, I think it'd certainly be interesting to see more data on this and see, like you talk about toxicity when you're adding these to the products and so on. Is there any standard level of toxicity for each of those?
There's actually a reference you can see at the bottom there that discusses that sort of thing, the assignment of toxicities to it. And there is data out there. I'll do what I can to collect a little bit more information and share it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else online? Any comments for Murray?
Steve.
Yeah, I would just like, this is Steve Cottrell here. I would like to, recognize the fact that, there's a ton of brands out there now in this marketplace that are using artificial terpenes and flavorings. And these are all of the things that we really, really need to be focusing on, because many of these products in concentration, when vaporized or incinerated, cause very high levels of formaldehyde. And we need, we're doing all the pesticide testing in the world on cannabis. I mean, this product, cannabis flower itself, is one of the safest products for sale in the state of Arizona because of the levels of pesticide testing we're doing. This product is incredibly safe. If we were to look at hops or at some of the other products that we're putting into our diets on a daily basis, if we followed our testing rules, they would never pass. They would be immediately thrown in the trash. And so we're now getting different vendors and manufacturers that are using these types of products, and they're using them in large quantities. And I think it is very important for us to be able to see that and put a level of safety over this part of the industry, because we are looking at potential harm on down the road if continued.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Anyone else? Any comments or questions? Max?
Hi everyone. I have a question. First of all, Marie, thanks a lot for the presentation. Very nice one. I want to know, let's say, like we have, like compliant testing for terpene. Like how are we going to interpret the data? Like, are we looking at terpene as quality testing or safety testing? Like, do you have any idea? Kind of like, if we say we're going to test it, right? Like how would we interpret those data?
Well, yeah, I looked to my guy here. I think safety is the one, because how do you measure quality? It's so subjective. So it starts with safety and knowing what the toxicity limits are. Beyond that, you go to Leafly or any number of sites, it's got pretty colored diagrams that says this is the influence of this terpene. But you can buy that strain and find that the terpenes aren't exactly the same. It isn't always the case. We tend to accept things on faith, and it's not true. Presence of terpenes and presence of cannabinoids can vary significantly between plants with exactly the same strain. It just depends on a lot of other variables like the conditions that the plants grow in and so on. So safety would be the principal concern, I would probably say.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I think I see Joe. Joe DeMana. Did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, thanks for that presentation. That was really thorough. Forgive me if this part was covered, but you had talked about
is talk with Jessica Alba, which actually has it all.
Ensuring that there is that you identify the toxicity level. But I didn't hear anything about sort of differentiating terpenes that are derived from the actual cannabis plant versus food grade. Would that be part of this?
I think you would have to test for whatever we would expect to see. And this is sort of beyond my scope of my experience. I know about the terpenes that are present in cannabis naturally, but I also know a lot of people don't extract this, don't bother. They toss them out because their extraction methodology, it makes it challenging, not impossible, but challenging to pull the terpenes as well. So if they want to sell a terpene product, and there's a number of products out there, edibles, topics, and so on, that do advertise incorporate terpenes, then they're maybe adding them through an industrial process. I can't speak for sure, but we know it happens a lot, particularly on inhalables.
I appreciate that. I guess what I would just add to the sort of the record is that my biggest concern is just that patients and consumers have an awareness and an appreciation for what they are consuming. And if it is food grade versus cannabis derived, I think that the patients and consumers also deserve to know that differentiation and make a choice accordingly. Certainly don't want to disrupt, anybody's proprietary cartridge, formulas or this, that, and the other in that realm. If the terpenes work, the terpenes work. But I think that, at least from my perspective, when I go into a shop to buy a cannabis product, I'm expecting it to be a cannabis product. So I'm really hoping to kind of dive into that.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Anyone else? Any comments or questions?
My only last question or statement on this is there are a lot of organizations that come from out of the state that are third parties that are producing products. And when you pull, say, a pre-roll out and it smells like you just opened a box of Fruit Loops or you opened up a thing of Starbursts, because that's not how flower smells. That's not how cannabis smells. That's not, that's not normal. And some of these companies are putting lots and lots of these potential carcinogens and harmful products into this, and we can't deter them away from it. So they're legal to do right now. And it would be great to see those products quite a bit more regulated or have oversight over them and what they're putting into the products.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Anyone else? All right.
I'll just make one last comment. So I think to take this to the next stage is we'll have some discussions offline with the labs, a couple of labs, talk to them about the real world in terms of measuring for terpenes, so we don't, not consider that. And then I would suggest that we gather together some other information from other states and then come up with a suggested list. I do think that anybody on a committee that represents a lab is their interest and knowledge and that is going to be key here. But objectively, since we're approaching the end of the year, if we want to do anything, we've got just a matter of weeks to do it. So I'll promise to provide some additional information and perhaps a straw man for the next meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you, Murray. Any last questions before we move on? Okay, great. Our next topic is medium chain triglycerides oil motion. And this is, I believe, Joe brought this forward. Joe Demena, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thanks, gang. So this is just sort of a continuation of the conversation we've been having. I remain really focused on MCT oils as well as food grade terpenes. And what I was able to find is in Michigan, the Cannabis Regulatory Agency added MCT oils effective October 1st, 2024 as a target analyte in marijuana products. So what we have here is the actual sort of target analyte names. So we can get very specific about a motion here in terms of testing. Now, the thing that I'm hoping is to get a little bit of feedback for is I would propose just right off the bat, most likely that we would do the same as Michigan, but I also don't want to, do a blanket sort of sweep. If there is, I don't know if the word's acceptable, but if there is a level of MCT oil that is a standardized, sort of best practice amount, we could certainly set that amount in the motion or however we go. But basically, long story short, I've identified the target analytes and I'm ready to do a motion. Just the specifics of it, I'd love to get a little bit of feedback or guidance or thoughts from anybody before I do.
Go ahead, Murray.
So Michael, can you refresh my memory, Joe, about what it is you're wanting to do with regard to MCT oil, recognizing it's commonly used in a variety of products?
Right. So for the Michigan Cannabis Regulatory Agency, they identified it as a target analyte specifically for inhalation products. So the motion would be differentiating that part. So certainly it wouldn't apply to edibles. That's a perfectly acceptable edible ingredient. But identifying, there's 4 here. I could name them, but I'm going to butcher. DHS, I did send this to you, right? You guys have it in front of you?
Yes.
Okay, good. So glycerol, tricopronate, and then tricropylate, tricoprate, and trolerate. So I tried it anyway. So what I would like to do is either make a motion to specific for inhalables, make a motion to set a standard for testing on MCT oils, these specific analytes, or if the group thinks that it makes more sense to simply recommend that they be banned and not used in inhalables, that's also acceptable to me. So that's the feedback I'm hoping to get.
Okay, well.
I'd like to hear what Steve has to say about this.
Okay.
Well, yeah, thanks for pointing me out there, Murray. Once upon a time in Arizona, I engaged in a very, very nasty lawsuit with another vape company that coincidentally used MCT oil in their products. And the lawsuit was over the fact that they were using MCT oil, and we put up the health benefits and the health not benefits about it. And that's what triggered that moment in time. And so there's all sorts of bad things that can happen from MCT oil and vaporizing it. There's a type of pneumonia that is caused from this. And I'm sorry, you'll have to forgive me that I have tried to put that moment in time out of my memory. But there are some MCT oil does cause some very nasty health what's the word I'm looking for? It's not good for you. So I support Joe's request 100%. I'll be the first one to agree with it.
Thanks, Steve.
So these health benefits, Joe, these are well documented then?
The health benefits? I'm
The
sorry?
health benefits and the negatives for MCT oil.
Yeah, negative benefits.
Oh yeah, the negative benefits, absolutely. I mean, if you just hit Google, you'll see tons of reports about toxicity and, what led Michigan to sort of, lead the way here. And that's part of what I'm getting at is, Michigan is taking the step to ban it. It sounds to me like there is no acceptable level of inhalation on MCT oils. That's kind of what I think I'm hearing. And so I think, it would make a lot of sense to simply just make a recommendation, at least from this group, that the legislature and that the DHS, just straight up ban it.
And Murray, again, you'd mentioned Michigan. In your work, Joe, have you seen other states that have outright banned it?
This would be the first one that I'm aware of. I was trying to find others, but I haven't found any.
Okay.
And also totally agreeable to table this and keep the conversation going, guys. I'm not ready to, take the hill on this yet. I really was hoping for, feedback and maybe a thoughtful discussion. But we did talk a little bit about it at the last meeting, so I thought maybe it would be best to put it on the agenda as a potential motion.
Generally speaking, I would normally just say, yes, absolutely, let's support this. But I'm not personally fully aware of the medical issues of MCT as inhalable. And I am a little hesitant to say, let's just plow ahead, because there may be stakeholders for whom this is important from the other perspective. So I think we need to hear from somebody that has something to say about that, or otherwise be convinced that, yes, it's a problem, it's a health problem, clearly we should come down hard. If a number of states had already said this, I'd feel more confident.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what we need is a bit more discussion.
Yeah,
maybe-
I think I agree. I'm feeling it head that direction as well. What I will do is, let's go ahead, if it's okay with you, DHS, we'll table this for now. And I'm going to send out to everybody, or at least to DHS, to disseminate the things that I have found. And it would be helpful if you all could take a look into it as well. What I'm most concerned about is making sure that we're not rocking the boat for businesses who potentially use MCT oils at an acceptable level. Which of course I don't want to rock the boat in that way. If there are health benefits, if there are negative benefits, let's have that discussion in a more robust way next time. So.
And Member Domena, could you also send the language that you're considering for your motion as well, so that we have a better idea of what direction you're wanting to go?
Cool. Yeah, we'll do.
Thank you.
If any of our university members or lab members have more information about this as well, please send that our way, and we'll be happy to share that with everyone as well.
Go ahead, Maxwell. Did you have a comment?
Right. I'm actually looking into Delta 8 and Delta 10 book product recently. I'm at Purdue right now. Actually, I'm working on a new collaboration. So I don't have anything to report on that project yet, but I will take a look at the MCT oil as well. Yeah. But Joe, actually, I also got a quick question for you. Is this something that you would find in like any vape pen? Like for example, like e-cigarette, hemp product, do you see MCT oil as well? Is that a common thing in vape pen?
Not me personally, but I do understand that it's used pretty commonly, especially in sort of the DIY vape community and those smaller vape shops. They love to kind of use these different sort of cutting agents and that sort of thing. So, but I couldn't really speak to sort of the hemp market or the black market. I just
Okay. All right. Yep. I'll ask around. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Max. Anyone else? Any comments for Joe?
I'm just going to say one last comment before you wrap this up. And then, I sort of totally agree with Steve about the testing we have in Arizona. I mean, it's thorough. When we look at the problems that occur in other states, in the media, you hear about things in California and sometimes in other states. And you wonder, how did those pesticides or heavy metals make it through to the end product? Fortunately, we don't see that in Arizona, at least to my knowledge, in any great amount, at least in the legal industry. And I think the more effective our standards are legally, the better, because, there is a lot of cannabis out there that's not going through the regulated market. Some of those players aren't necessarily good players. They spray pesticides and they don't really care really what happens after that. Hopefully in the coming months and years, we'll see Arizona given more teeth in terms of going after these bad players. But for now, the best we can do is be good custodians of the medical market, medical regulated cannabis market. And setting the standards that we're due here is a really good thing, because one day maybe those bad players will have to come into the fold.
Good. Jay Neary, you had your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, I know that MCT oil was a big thing with the CDC when they were having the vitamin E acetate problems, when people were getting sick, and they were finding the MCT oil also in the people's lungs with the vitamin E acetate, and they still researching it. They hadn't come out with a comment on it, but it's not CDC approved because they didn't think people would be smoking it. So there's kind of an idea that it's not good, putting cooking oil in your lungs and smoking it, but at the same time, there's no clear definition yet.
Thank you, Jay. Anyone else? Any final comments? Okay, we look forward to gathering more information on this and getting it out to you all and having further discussions in our next meeting. Brett, thank you. Okay, I believe you're up next, Fabiola, with the review of the MMTAC report.
Yes, so there's a couple of the lab people on the call. So there's something you would like to add as I'm going through this, please feel free. So, alrighty. So this portion much remains the same as the prior years, the same background, same duties. We do have this year thus far, we haven't had any recommendations to remove any analytes. We haven't had any other recommendations this year. And I ran these numbers, at least for the facility side, we're talking from January to September 3rd. So there was 88 different inspections that had a testing related citation. Of those 88, there was 112 testing related actual deficiencies that were found across 82 licenses. The breakup of that is 35 medical dispensaries and 47 marijuana establishments. All of those deficiencies did receive a plan of correction. And we had a couple, looks like I didn't include the actual number of which ones ended in the enforcement and the civil money penalties, but if you look in the chart, you can see how many. So I will add that number, which the number could possibly change if we have any that are currently in process as well. So on the lab side, it looks like they had 17 testing related reports. They found 342 violations that were issued to 12 independent third-party laboratories. And this is their breakdown further. This is us. And then as of this meeting, I will be adding Connor for this. So this is no longer vacant. Chart we were talking.
Do you have any sense, Fabiola, how this compares to say last year?
No, can't tell you right now, but if I looked at last year's report,
Kind of curious to know if we're seeing more stability.
We will look at that for our next meeting.
So a civil money penalty, is that usually like a second stage after multiple? So they have to really be screwed up.
Usually, it depends on the scope and severity of that deficiency as well. If we go out there and even if an establishment has never had a deficiency in testing before, if we go out and they just flat out, it didn't seem like they even tried, they just don't have test results for multiple products and they are selling those products, that's likely going to be an enforcement action right away because that's a health and safety concern. So it just depends. But what we tend to see is it's an issue with one thing on the test the first time. And then if we go out a second time, yes, that's going to be a civil money penalty. And then if it keeps on going a third or a fourth time, that's where you might see a notice of intent to revoke. In order to settle that, it would be a much higher penalty. Because that's, again, putting products out there without testing and continually doing so, that elevates that health and safety concern. Or again, if a product has failed some testing and it's still made it out to consumers, that's also going to be a serious health and safety concern that might result in enforcement actions.
and then we've included our most common testing related deficiencies for the dispensaries. These are those rules that are most commonly cited. And it continues on to this other page. And then we also have the most common testing related deficiencies for establishments as well. And then this is the labs table. And their top testing citations.
So we encourage everyone to review this before the next meeting and let us know if you have any questions about what some of those citations mean or what would lead to some of those. We're happy to discuss that. And by we, I mean these lovely people to my left.
And then I don't know, I think in the past, no, just kidding, we have. I digress.
So we would need any additions or changes by, I believe we'll have a meeting next month, right? And then we usually try to wrap it up by November meeting and vote on it so that we can get the committee's approval to move forward and submit that on the second Monday in January of 2025.
Absolutely. Historically, it tends to be a little difficult to get quorum as we get closer to the holidays in December. So we will definitely have that report to you in its draft form for next month's meeting. And our hope would be that we would do what we've done in the past to approve it and allow the department to make the necessary changes to update just the data to reflect any changes. And again, I know there are certain items we discussed today that we believe are of high importance, but this report's not your be all end all chance to discuss those things. We'll continue having meetings into next year and beyond.
Okay, great. Thanks, Megan. Any questions anyone has online or in the room?
I just have one statement that I'd like to make that has had me, I've been part of this committee since day one, and we have taken a lot of things to the legislature and recommendations over the years which that were sensible and in the best for public safety. And many of these have never come to fruition. How do we, as we're, really, I think, all in favor of adding terpenes to this list and getting that to be part of the testing regimes protocols on a daily, weekly basis. How long will this take for this type of a thing to come to effect? Because so far, my 4 or 5 years of being on this committee have not yielded any changes.
That depends. It depends on what the change is and whether or not it requires legislative changes or if it just requires rule changes. I think we've talked about this a little bit in the past. In marijuana, we've kind of been spoiled a little bit where we've had super exempt rulemaking opportunities. We had it with SB 1494 that passed in 2020 or 2019, I'm sorry, and led to the testing program where we didn't have to jump through all the rulemaking hoops that we normally do. And I don't mean hoops, I mean they're fail safes and they're there for a reason, but that includes going before the Governor's Regulatory Review Council and things like that. The downside to going through all of those normal stages is that it doesn't allow you to correct things or be agile with your rules and whenever changes need to be made. So we're in the point right now with medical marijuana where we no longer have any super exempt rulemaking unless it's directly related to the adult use statutes. So we can't just change the rules quickly or easily on the medical side. We still have exempt rulemaking on the adult use side through December of next year. But again, if you make changes there and they're not consistent on the medical side, we know that that throws a lot of challenges for everyone as well. So a lot of times, honestly, it can be easier to promote change through legislation. But this is marijuana and it was put into law by voter initiatives, which means any legislation needs a 3/4 vote in the legislature in order to pass. And it has to further the intent of those voter initiatives. So it's just, I know that just sounds like a lot of gobbledygook, Steve, and I wish I had better answers for you. But the truth is things just take time. And so it depends on what path you're going to go down. But if the industry believes that terpene testing is extremely important and the industry, uses a lobbyist or something and goes and works with their legislatures to get that on the agenda, that's one way those things could happen. A lot of those things are happening right now. This is kind of the time of year where a lot of people are setting their legislative agendas for next year and things, but there's also, it's an election year. So that throws things up in the air too. So I don't have a great answer for you. But these things do take time and it just depends on whether it truly needs legislation or rulemaking. And if it's a rulemaking that has to involve both medical and adult use, we have to get basically on the rulemaking agenda for the agency. And it's, again, marijuana has been a little bit spoiled where we've been able to be very reactive and change to things very quickly. But there are a lot of programs using the same rulemaking resources with the department. So that's a reality that we have to face as well.
Thank you, Megan.
Sorry, I wish I could give you a better, more succinct answer.
That's a good question.
Sure.
In the past, we had made a motion to allow for the retest of edibles and topicals. And so I think the comment that was made around why that didn't necessarily go to rulemaking early this year was that it had to fall into a regular rulemaking cycle. And do I understand correctly that 2025 is a regular rulemaking cycle?
You're talking about when our 5-year review would be due? I am not sure when the next one is due.
We last did it in for medical, we last had our rules effective in 2023, so it would be a while for medical yet.
We'll have to look at that to get you a firm date, but anytime we do change rules, that can impact that as well.
Thank you.
And a regular rulemaking, it doesn't always have to be after that 5-year review. It's just there usually has to be something to spur it.
Like a legislative change or something like that's an example when you'll see rulemaking go outside of that schedule.
All right, I know it's sort of really speculative. Are you anticipating that rescheduling by the federal government will create additional work for you or confusion or complexity or anything? Or will things just continue along?
I think no one knows. No one knows what that will look like and what that'll mean. It just depends on how that happens and how it interplays with all the different states. I mean, think about it like alcohol, right? It's federally legal, but there are very different alcohol laws in different states.
Sure, and Schedule 3 is not Schedule 5, let's face it.
Okay, any other questions from any members? Okay, I think we've got a lot of things on our list for the next meeting, which will be next month, I believe. So probably Fabiola will be sending out some polls or some dates so that we can ensure that all of you can make it. And again, we'll have that information posted and available to take a look at. And those of you who can gather more information along with Murray and others, that will be great to be able to bring forward to the committee again. And I think with that, unless there are any further questions, we're ready to adjourn. Go ahead, Murray.
Sure.
Motion to adjourn. Yep.
Thank you, Murray. Do we have a
All right.
second?
I second.
Okay, second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Hi.
All opposed, say nay. I don't think anyone doesn't want to. But anyway, I appreciate you all joining today. Thank you for joining us, and thanks again to Megan Whitby and Kim Crawford for joining me today, and also for the folks that were able to come up and join us in the room. And thanks again to the staff for pulling all the things together that they need to get the agenda together, get it out there, and ensure that you guys can get it in time and be here for
Staff
the
is
meeting.
code for Fabiola. Thank you,
Yeah,
Fabiola.
Fabiola.
We'd be lost without her.
So with that, thank you everyone for joining us again today. We appreciate it. Great meeting, and look forward to talking to you at our next meeting.
Matt wanted to speak
Well,
about.
yeah, before,
Sorry, Max, go ahead.
yeah, I want to make a quick, announcement. I think everybody on the council should have already received this flyer that I sent out this morning. So our fall seminar for Cannabis Sativa, the Environment and Your Health is next Monday and Tuesday. So we have a speaker, Mike Mann, who is going to talk about the agricultural uses of industrial hemp on Monday at 4:45 in downtown. And then we also have two other speakers coming from Tennessee and Colorado. One will be talking about the terpene, but then she's talking about after you get the flower, how do you get the terpene from the other part of the plant and use it as biopesticide? So that's really, really interesting. And then we also have Dr. Nicole Weinstrom, who will be talking about microbiome and behavioral effects of cannabis. So really interesting talk. We also have a science social on Monday at 6. That is going to be in AC Wilderness. So part of it is to introduce our students at ASU to you guys who are expert and practitioner in the cannabis biotech and analytical community. But also, this is, a part of our outreach to bring, different stakeholders who are working in the tech sector in cannabis and hemp science together. So if you are around, please to come. It is bring your own drink, but we do have appetizers. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that, Max. I know I got it this morning. Any folks didn't get it, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to pass it along to you or reach out to Max. And I'm sure he'd love to see us all there. So thanks again for that. We appreciate it, Max.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.